Welcome to Resilient. I'm Lori Lorenzo, Deloitte's Research and Insights Director for our Chief Legal Officer program, and co-host of the Chief Legal Officer track of the Resilient podcast series. In the Resilient podcast series, we've been diving into various aspects of our rapidly evolving world. We're talking to leaders about tenacity, resolve, and of course, resilience. Today is no exception. Today we ask, what impact does a career spanning public service, private practice, and large public corporations have on a leadership mindset? What does financial inclusion for all look like, and what does a leader need to do to make this mission come to life? How can legal leaders drive transformation and modernization? We explore these questions and gain insights from legal leader and personal friend Anthony Sharett, Executive Vice President, Chief Legal and Compliance Officer, and Corporate Secretary at Meta Financial Group. Let's hear what Anthony has to say. Anthony, it is so good to be talking to you today. I am really excited to record this episode of Resilient with you. We have been friends, almost a decade now? We originally met through the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity, where I was running the Fellows Program and you were in one of the earlier classes. And that was such a great experience, both from kind of the staff side that I was a part of, just being able to meet and interact with so many talented lawyers. And then over the last decade, watching those lawyers, yourself included, just really take off, find their voices, find their path, take on leadership roles, and make this huge impact on the legal profession in general, but also more specifically on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So today we're just going to talk about all of that. We'll start at the beginning and wind our way through your fantastic career to date and some of the events and experiences that have shaped who you are. Did you always know you wanted to be a lawyer, or was there somebody or some experience early in your life that said, hey, maybe this is a good path for me?
Thanks, Lori. I did not, and I think that's typical. I think many lawyers who are lawyers today did not grow up thinking that they were going to be lawyers. I think there was a little bit of an evolution. I didn't have any lawyers in my family. Most of the lawyers that I saw were on TV. But one of the things I did know is I really wanted to help out other people. And it is probably the main reason why one of my first jobs out of law school was, working for the Ohio Department of Commerce, working for a government agency where I felt like I was doing public good. And so, no, I did not grow up thinking that I was going to be a lawyer. I had a college professor that, talked to me about this perhaps being an opportunity for me. And that's really when I started to think about the legal profession. Really glad that I did as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I always knew I'd be a lawyer. I think my mom knew pretty early on because I had a bit of a spunky, argumentative spirit.
One of the things that I've discovered throughout my career through taking various assessments, one of the things that is really sort of borne out is I tend to be a chameleon, whether it's being more introverted, more extroverted. And what I'll tell you is I'm very much okay with that. And I actually think, being sort of that utility player, if you will, has really served me well. There is no doubt that sort of utility mindset came from, in large part, my upbringing. When you hear the term code switching from time to time, particularly among, African American and diverse leaders in corporate America, our ability to navigate and meet the needs of the day when having important conversations is a really unique skill set. And for me, there's no doubt that ability came from having to do that when I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old.
You shared with me the last time we talked that your dad used to give you some good advice about experiences. What was that?
My dad used to say to me all of the time that we are all a sum total of our experiences. I often think about what he said. And in fact, I'm not sure that I would have taken some of the calculated risks if I didn't have that in the back of my mind, what my dad would always say. And I'm grateful for that advice.
Well, let me ask you more about those strategic and calculated risks. Can you tell us about a moment in your career where you were debating and how you came to your ultimate decision?
Yeah, absolutely. I really started out as a bank regulator almost 20 years ago in the state of Ohio and really enjoyed that work. I was an attorney examiner with the Ohio Department of Commerce. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about that job was I really felt like I was doing public good. I was in public service and protecting consumers at the same time. Once I got into that job, I actually wasn't sure that I would ever leave, and I was okay with that. But the superintendent at the time called me to his office one day and said, hey, Anthony, doing a great job here, but I'm going to need you to actually go work at a law firm. And I couldn't believe this. I was like, well, I thought I was doing a good job. I thought I was getting, some solid reviews, and I was. But what he was telling me is, I could always come back to public service. I could always come back to the Ohio Department of Commerce if that's something that I wanted to do. But what I had not done in my career was to work at a law firm where I could really formalize some of the training that I know that I needed to be a good lawyer. And, at the time, there really wasn't a robust professional development program for lawyers that worked for the agency. And so it was really his mentorship and his sponsorship that enabled me to go work. And that's what really started me along the private practice journey.
You did stay in private practice for a few years and then moved into in-house practice. And was that an obvious choice for you, or was that another moment of should I stay or should I go?
It was not. I will tell you, I spent, 11 or 12 years in private practice. At the last law firm that I was at, I actually thought that I would retire from that firm. I developed a nice little practice and had wonderful colleagues there. And the firm just really enabled my practice to grow. But certainly when an opportunity came up to go to this larger insurer, one of the largest insurers in the country, it was a very difficult decision for me. But again, I had another mentor and sponsor of mine who said, look, you've proven that you can, work at a law firm and be successful. These in-house counsel opportunities don't come along too often, particularly at the time when I lived in Columbus, Ohio. While there's a lot of, Fortune 500 companies that are headquartered there, which is great. So fortunately, I had the opportunity to go in-house with this company. And it was really a great decision for a couple of reasons. One is, I went directly in as a divisional general counsel from private practice, working with some wonderful team members and colleagues. And then number two, for the very first time, I was able to work for a company that was mission driven and focused, great products and services to offer that really allowed me to consider the business strategy along with the legal support that we needed to provide. So a difficult decision, but ultimately very glad that I made the transition in-house.
Yeah, it is. I've noticed that too. I mean, being able to be connected to a mission and a purpose really makes the difference. If you're going to work an 8 or 12 or 15-hour day, if you're going to bill time, if you're going to get up early and stay late, having that mission that you can just fall back on and remember this is why we get up in the morning. This is how we help people. For me, it's made a huge difference.
The CEO of the prior company that I worked at used to say all of the time that culture eats strategy for lunch. And many of us have heard that. I believe that to be true to this very day. When employees have options, and many professionals do, many lawyers have options, right? I mean, we went to college, we got a law degree. Many lawyers have advanced business degrees as well, diversified, work experiences. We have lots of options. And of course, we can always hang a shingle if that's something that we wanted to do. And so the ability to work for an organization where it is a mission-driven organization, not one driven only by shareholder return, although that's important for public companies, it really does make you feel good about where you're working, number one. And then number two, I would be remiss if I did not mention some of the social tragedies, not just injustices, but tragedies over the last several years, not just this year, not just in 2020, with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the many others. while many companies before those incidents focused on social justice causes that make sense for them, it was really after some of these horrible events when many companies were almost forced to reckon with some of these injustices because they just weren't occurring in the cities and streets where we live, but some of these micro inequities that are all too familiar, were happening in the corporate environment. There is no way to separate what was happening in our community over the last 18 months from our work environment. You cannot do it. And for the companies that try to ignore what's happening outside, I think it becomes very difficult for them to lead their employees. So I am fortunate enough to work for a mission-driven organization. Our mission is financial inclusion for all. I feel good when I go to work every morning knowing that I'm driving towards a mission like that.
Well, so you said a lot, and I want to unpack a few of those things. So the first place I want to just dig a little deeper is, as the chief legal officer at Meta, that puts you in a position of power and authority, decision making. What are you doing to help the company navigate through the wake of all of the difficult things we've been through? Because I think you're right. You can't separate the community experience from the workplace experience. The two, it's like saying there's such a thing as work and life. They're interwoven in so many ways. So as a leader, how are you helping lead the decisions of MetaBank, and how are you helping your colleagues and peers understand the path forward?
Well, I'm very fortunate at Meta to be working with not only our CEO and a leadership team, but also our board, who understands the importance of creating space for conversation, right? If employees feel like there could be negative repercussions from speaking up or speaking honestly, even if it's sometimes inarticulate because our emotions are weighing so heavily on some of these heavy topics, that's okay. Not only is it okay, but we have actually tried to foster and create space for that very discussion. And so when we saw some of the tragedies that occurred to Black and brown people across this country, our CEO quickly created space to have honest conversations. He led, along with many of us, some of the other executive leadership team members at Meta, really transparent and facilitated fireside chats where the ground rules were, you can pretty much say whatever you want, so long as that we're respectful and that we listen. And so to me, that's the hallmark of inclusion, right? And that's creating space for people to have a voice and ensuring that they are heard. And so that's what we did. And I will tell you, we also created an opportunity for people to send in, questions and emails anonymously. What came out of that was this. Frankly, there were some areas where we just frankly had to get better. And certainly there are areas from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. I think our heart has always been in the right place here, but we just weren't as purposeful or as intentional as we wanted to be. And as, sort of Brian Stevenson says, we weren't as proximate as we should have been. And so, that was really one of the changes that we made. So, out of that, certainly doubled down on our diversity, equity, and inclusion, right down to hiring a senior executive reporting to the CEO, that will be her focus. We doubled down on our environmental, social, and governance program, which I lead as the executive leader, but certainly that is a company-wide effort, as we know, for those of us familiar with ESG. And we know DE&I is an important component of ESG. We have programmatically had programs that have doubled down on, implicit bias training has been around forever, but we're double clicking on that. Not just the recognition that we all have our biases, but how do those biases actually negatively impact certain people within an organization? And having that recognition, what do we do about it? And then, really, I think one of the unique things for us is, how do we get our message around social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, financial inclusion for all? How do we get that to people outside of the four corners of our buildings here at Meta? And so sort of this marketplace message is something that is going to be really important to us in the months to come, and there'll be more about that from us.
Well, and I think it's so interesting the way you've woven all of these together because earlier this year I wrote an article about well-being, right? Just as the pandemic was really causing the enterprise and industry to think differently about how they worked and how people were proximate to each other. And as I dug even into what Deloitte does on this effort, what I came to understand is that the framing of well-being for Deloitte is not just mental well-being, kind of physical well-being, but also financial well-being and the relationship that these things have to each other. So it's interesting to me that you've woven the same elements together, right? So hiring someone into that diversity role and taking responsibility over the social, the ESG piece, and then just the mission of Meta, which is inclusion for all. Tell me what you think what Meta thinks is that means that mission. What does inclusion for all mean?
Great question, Lori. And, I'm just really glad to hear that, you're focused on sort of well-being and, wellness, right? Because for so many of us, during the COVID-19 environment, studies have shown that people are actually working longer hours working in a remote environment than less. People are taking less breaks. It's very difficult to turn work off. Lawyers have heightened, cases of anxiety and depression and drug abuse and things like that. So it is such a timely and important topic, and really glad to hear that you're focusing on that. Well, I think the best way for me to describe, this concept of financial inclusion for all in our mission is actually through, some of the things that we've done recently. As we know, Congress, passed the CARES Act, and born out of the CARES Act, where, economic impact payments or stimulus payments that went to millions of Americans in a dire time of need. There's been 2 rounds of that, right? Well, Meta was partnered with the Department of Treasury to offer these payments to millions of Americans on cards. And you may ask, why would the Department of Treasury, look to Meta to provide these economic impact or stimulus payments to consumers and not use a check or direct deposit? Well, that's because we know that millions of Americans are underbanked, do not have access to a bank account for direct deposit, nor would they have an ability necessarily to easily cash a check without a fee. And so hopefully, our participation in this program, with the Department of Treasury providing billions of stimulus dollars to millions of consumers, hopefully that directly illustrates, what financial inclusion for all means. We did not want people who clearly would qualify for these stimulus payments to not receive them because of a technicality or because lack of access. And, we are very proud of that.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't stopped to think about kind of non-traditional bankers or folks that don't have access to bank, what you call underbanked. So tell me, I'm going to switch gears a little bit to talk about your CLO role at Meta, because this is your first kind of head of everything role. And you've come in with an agenda, right? We've talked a few times about the way you've transformed legal, the way you look at technology, the way you think about talent. I want to maybe just pick your brain a little bit about what that transition was like and how you were able to set your strategy and what you've accomplished.
Oh, thanks, Lori. When I arrived at Meta, I was initially hired in as the general counsel and corporate secretary. And in about 7 to 8 months in, the leader of our governance, risk, and compliance team moved over and was over to the business side as our COO and co-president. So with his transition, I was then asked to not only lead the legal team and function as a corporate secretary, but I also then picked up the governance, risk, and compliance teams as well. And it has been a really rewarding experience for me to not only lead legal, but to lead compliance and risk and government relations and ESG. But when I came into the legal department was certainly high functioning. I have a fantastic legal team, some of the smartest and brightest lawyers that I have ever worked with anywhere. And I think even more importantly, they're just really nice and kind people and care about what we're doing here at Meta. So fantastic team. But a couple of years ago, back in 2018, we merged with a company called Crestmark. And Crestmark was one of the leading commercial financial services companies in a few niche areas like SBA lending and equipment lease financing and things like that. That integration was a little choppy for us. And as it relates to the legal team, we had the Crestmark legal team post integration, and then we had the Meta legal team. But what we didn't have is one legal team that was working together in a non-siloed fashion. And so one of the first things that we did is use process, people and technology to try to break down those silos and barriers. And it was no fault of anyone. It's just, I think for many it just seemed easier. So, what does a payments legal team have to do with a commercial finance legal team? Turns out quite a bit, particularly when we're working off the same P&L and balance sheet. And so a couple of things that we did right away. Number one, I quickly promoted one of our talented paralegals into a legal operations director role. Once we did that, next, we then did a lot of listening, where we sort of talked to business and functional support leaders around the company to sort of ask them, how was the legal department doing? Where were some opportunities of improvement for us? We synthesized that information. We then sent a much broader survey out to both internal and external stakeholders to ask them questions about the legal department as well. How are we doing? What could we do better? Any skills gaps? We received that information. And then I shared that with the leadership team, and really I wanted to accomplish a couple of things. I wanted to demonstrate to them that their opinion matters to us. Secondly, I wanted them to really materially know what were some of the areas of opportunity for the legal team. Where could we grow and improve? And where were we on the sort of the maturity scale? And then third, I wanted them to be a part of our solution. I believe when you have a legal team of 25 to 30 for a publicly traded, a couple $1 billion company, we need to be working collaboratively on solutions, particularly when you're talking about transformation. Once we got that information, we were then able to come up with a legal transformation strategy that really hit on some key areas. We hired some new key talent in areas that we were missing some talent in our securities and assistant corporate secretarial space. Number two, we instituted some outside counsel tracking software to help us sort of with our bills. Three, we transformed our outside counsel partnership into a preferred provider network, where we reduced the number of law firms that we were traditionally using, which was over 50, to about 12. Finally, we lifted up our contract management system by replacing an outdated system with a new cloud-based system that we're really excited about.
Yeah, I think so many legal functions are really taking a hard look at this concept of transformation or modernization, whatever they call it. And you've hit on some of the things that we've seen others do successfully. The first of those is hiring someone into a legal ops role. I think we've got data that shows that's the number one facilitator of transformation, right? So it not just allows the legal function to operate in a different way, but it also gives the GC or the CLO the ability to operate at a more strategic level while someone focuses on the tactics. And then the implementation of the various technologies, and you talked about a couple places where you did that, but and for each legal department, it's different, right? If you don't have a big litigation profile, then you don't need a managed service and e-discovery necessarily, whereas you might need a contract lifecycle management. But either way, having kind of that hard look at where can we be more efficient and where can that efficiency be leveraged with technology. And I love that you brought people process technology, because that is the framework we talk about a lot. It's so easy to just look at people, let me just hire more people, or so easy to just look at technology, let me implement this new technology. But really, I think the magic is where they all come together. It sounds like that's been your experience too. Talk to me a little bit about mentorship and sponsorship. So you touched on this when you were talking earlier about kind of your transition through the law firms and then making a move in-house. I think you worked for Kurt Tunnell, who is one of my all-time favorite people. He was just such a joy to be around, just constantly happy and encouraging. And I think he mentored everyone that he came in contact with, whether he meant to or not. So in addition to him, it sounds like you've had some others. What has that experience been like, and how do you reinvest that in the people that you have the privilege to lead?
If the term sponsorship and mentorship, well, that shows up in the dictionary, certainly there could be a picture of Kurt Tunnel next to both of those terms. He really embodied both sponsorship and mentorship. And, those who are fortunate enough to get to know him are very lucky. Colin Powell has said that being a positive person is a force multiplier in your life. I truly believe that. All of us are going to have bad days. We're going to have days that don't go according to plan. More than anything else for me, it's remaining a positive person. Now, what it does mean is, look, all of us, we have a finite time that we're going to be here. All of us have been given gifts that are unique to us. And so it's really incumbent upon us. And in fact, I believe it's our responsibility to take those unique gifts and try to better other people's lives, and also to try to provide help when asked. And so when it comes to mentorship and sponsorship, I have been very lucky throughout my personal and professional life that there have been people who have taken time out of their busy schedule and out of their busy lives to provide me with the constructive feedback that I have needed, but also to provide me with what I would call timely words of encouragement. Just those little things here or there that they may not even know that you need. And so, I look at the folks that have been very special to me and very kind, almost like a board of advisors for me. You're going to have a diverse network of people in your life. And so I just know that I feel very lucky and very fortunate to have a group of people who have my best interest at heart. And in turn, I try to do the same. I think some people who are mentors and sponsors typically only do that for those where they feel either a personal affinity or where the mentee has reached out. I try not to do that. If there is someone who I think could use a word of encouragement or a nudge here or there, I don't always wait for them in the mentor or sponsorship role. Sometimes I'll proactively reach out. And that would be what I would encourage others out there. Sometimes as mentors and sponsors, we may have to make the first contact or initiate that relationship, because through time, comes wisdom, and we may see where we can have a positive impact. So, I used to kind of wait to see if somebody, wanted me to kind of sponsor or mentor them. I find that I'm being more proactive about that as I kind of progress throughout my career.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget as we become more senior how scary it can be to reach out sometimes. So that's a great tactic. Anthony, what is in your future as you look kind of in your crystal ball? What goals do you have? What are you excited about?
Well, again, I hate to go back to it, but again, this is the benefit of working for an organization where the mission aligns with your personal passion. I'm excited about that. There are, so many sort of unique things that we're working on. In many ways, we're a pretty innovative company. We have lots of partnerships with companies that are aligned with our values and what we're trying to do. I'm excited about that. And I think, secondarily, what I'm really excited about more broadly within our profession is, while we have made strides to diversify the ranks, we are very far away from spiking the football. And in fact, in some sectors, we've actually regressed a bit. And so, a lot of my time currently is being spent on, helping those that aspire, particularly people of color, that aspire to the CLO or GC role, and figuring out, sort of what I can do to help them along their journey. And then I guess finally, one of the other things that I'm really excited about is the environmental, social, and governance commitment that we are making. One of the things that I didn't touch upon when we were talking about legal transformation is it's great to set up these new processes through enhanced technology being led by talented people. But if you don't measure yourself, it's very difficult to understand how well you're really doing. So one of the things that we have done there is we've instituted KRIs and KPIs where we can actually measure ourselves. And these KRIs and KPIs actually support or amplify broader business goals. I bring that up because with our ESG program, which is still pretty much in its infancy, although we've made some significant strides in the last year, ultimately, we're going to want to measure ourselves. It's one thing to say that we've donated X amount of money to nonprofit charities that fit within our community impact model. That's fantastic. It's another thing to say that our retention rate of employees is going down. That's fantastic. But if there's no sort of measurements in place to understand what those numbers really mean, how impactful are we really? And so I'm really excited about the fact that we have a board. We have an ESG board level committee. We have a ESG, management committee here, a wonderful ESG leader. So I am really excited about the work that we're doing in this space around sustainability, human capital, pay equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, our governance practices, our ethics practices. Not only we're doing all of these things today, but we will be pulling all of this together under one program. I am really excited about that, particularly when you consider our mission.
That is exciting. And I look forward to watching you achieve all that. So the title of this podcast is Resilient. So I have to ask you, what are 3 characteristics of a resilient chief legal officer?
Oh boy, that's a great question. I'm going to think about chief legal officers that I know that I think embody what a great CLO should be, and how a great CLO shows up for their team and those that they lead. One characteristic is consistency. I actually think being a reliable and a consistent leader is actually not talked about enough. When you think about depending on how big your department is, whether you lead, 5 people or 500 people, people are always going to be watching you as a leader of that group. And those, leaders that show up consistently day in and day out, sort of left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. I think that is a wonderful and understated characteristic of any leader, particularly a CLO. So that sort of reliability and consistency would be sort of number one. Number 2, empathy. Empathy. I'm not sure in this day and age, given all of the things that we are collectively dealing with, COVID-19, a little bit of an economic downturn, unemployment, anxiety among our employees, retention issues, social justice issues. I'm not sure you can be an effective leader if you don't do so with empathy. And that is, certainly before I make a decision, make a pronouncement, make a policy change, or whatever it is, that I don't first put myself in the shoes of those that could be directly impacted and thinking about what that means. And then I think, third is you have got to be nimble. When you think about resiliency, nimbleness is extremely, extremely important. Even the most conservative companies out there and the most conservative industries likely have a lot of change going on. It's inevitable because of the environment that we're in. We just had an administration change, in the White House. We've got congressional changes. All of this is going to impact our business. So no day is going to be the same. And we all understand that. But it's those CLOs that embrace that and understand that tomorrow is absolutely going to be different than it is today. And it's how I react to those environmental changes. That is really what's going to make the difference between, sort of good and great. Those CLOs and GCs that embody that, they're all very nimble as well.
Anthony, in light of everything that the collective we have been through in the last year, what gives you hope for the future?
Well, what gives me hope is really the word that I've been thinking about is recognition. And I don't mean recognition from a reward perspective. What I mean is I think there has been a collective recognition around these injustices and a recognition that We cannot just bury our heads in the sand and think that people's feelings are going to change without candid conversation and discussion. And so I think the corporate America has finally recognized some of these injustices are not put up for political debate. Bad things do happen to good people. Some of these tragedies are very unjust. And so the corporations, the leaders, the people that recognize that we have to have, candid conversations around this and understanding how some of these things can impact our employees, it's vital. It's critical to success. And so I think there has been a collective recognition around the fact that we have got to tackle some of these issues head on. And it's not just about writing a check to pick your nonprofit civic organization or social justice organization, but it's about becoming a little more proximate to the issues in a way that, many companies have the ability to do. So I feel, just very fortunate to be working with such great colleagues here, but also thankful for the colleagues that I've worked with throughout my career.
Yeah, I feel the same way, Anthony. I feel like I've just, in many cases, been lucky to be in a good place at a good time and had the opportunity to meet people like you and some of the other great folks and friendships that we have in common, and just all the fantastic people and the stories. I mean, everyday heroes, great leaders, wonderful examples of mentors, and it's just been such a great career. And so I look forward to, and I'm hopeful for, our continued journey, both yours and mine. And thanks so much for your time today. This has been really fun. I love getting to learn more about you.
Well, I thank you. And I thank you for the questions. You're very good at this, by the way. So, thank you for having me and inviting me to do this. I've had a lot of fun.
Anthony, thank you for sharing your insights. You've given us a lot to think about with respect to legal transformation, financial equity of all, and your experience across public and financial services leadership role. I especially appreciate your perspective on how having a mission is so critical to the work you do. It's a great reminder of why we get up in the morning and how we can help others. We covered a lot on today's episode, and if you want to know more about the Chief Legal Officer's role and many perspectives across legal leadership, visit us on Deloitte.com and search Chief Legal Officer. I'd like to thank the team at our podcast production partner, Rivet 360. Before I sign off, I have 2 questions for you. First, what did you think? And second, what can we bring you next? Feedback is so important. We'd like to hear from you about topics and leaders you're interested in. Hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter to share your ideas. For more insights and many iconic and resilient leaders, just go to Deloitte.com/US/resilient. Until next time, stay safe and remain resilient.